ये है आपका अपना सबरंग 94.7 FM.
Very much, Alistair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to recognize my colleague, Minister of State for Finance, Kevin Sorensen, and my colleague, Joan Crockatt, Member of Parliament for Calgary Centre, and also Minister of Finance for Alberta, the Honourable Robin Campbell. It's a pleasure, as always, to be here in Calgary and today with many of Calgary's business leaders and people who share an interest in matters of public policy. For more than 120 years, this chamber has been at the very heart of Calgary, and I'm pleased to return for my third opportunity to speak to the members of Calgary's business community. The spirit of entrepreneurship placed Alberta at the center of our country, a mighty engine in the heart of Confederation. Alberta is Canada's third largest provincial economy, 17% of our nominal GDP, with only 11% of our population. Your momentum has been strong. Real GDP grew by 3.8% in 2013, and private sector forecasters estimate real GDP grew by 4.1% last year, the highest among all provinces. What that has meant for the people of Alberta is 2.3 million jobs, an unemployment rate of 4.7%, nearly 2% lower than the national average. And that is your province's success story. Calgary tells a similar tale. Your city's economy has been among the fastest growing major cities in Canada. But more than that, economists ranked Calgary among the top 5 best places to live on earth. Strong and free is the Albertan creed. These words ring true today, even though this great province is being sorely tested by an unexpected and dramatic fall in crude oil prices since last June. This new reality poses a great, but not entirely unprecedented challenge. It represents the third largest price decline in the last 4 decades, exceeded only by the 1988 OPEC collapse and the sharp decline and rapid recovery we saw during the Great Recession. L'effet de la chute du cours du pétrole sur l'économie canadienne est complexe et comporte des avantages et des inconvénients. Les consommateurs en profitent à la pompe car le faible prix de l'essence revient à accorder un allègement fiscal. The impact of lower oil prices on the Canadian economy is complex and creates benefits and harm. Consumers are benefiting at the pump as lower gas prices act like a tax cut to drivers. So enhanced consumption savings flow from lower prices. Also, energy costs, manufacturing, transportation companies decline, along with the Canadian dollar, which makes these and other sectors more competitive. On the other hand, profits suffer, capital investment slows, and employment decline. And of course, royalty payments to provinces fall, in Alberta's case, significantly. As well, Canada's terms of trade deteriorate, and reduce corporate taxes from the oil sector impact adversely on provincial and federal revenue. Given the current volatility, there is no consensus about how low oil prices will fall or how long they will stay there. Nevertheless, every knowledgeable person I've spoken to believes, and history tells us, that prices will eventually move well above current levels. The solution to low prices is low prices. They reduce production from high-cost producers and therefore constrain the supply. And they stimulate economic growth and therefore ultimately drive up global demand. This would alleviate the current situation, which was caused by a massive increase in U.S. shale oil production and a decrease in demand flowing from weaker global economic growth. For 15 years, world oil prices have risen, interrupted by a sharp recessionary decline in 2008-2009. Alberta has benefited immensely from growing global energy demand, generated in part by the economic power of non-OECD countries. Millions of people, 300 million in China alone, since 2000, are moving to cities. They're buying cars and building houses. They're engaging in a great enrichment whose rapidity is unparalleled in human history. As a result, the International Energy Agency predicts that global energy demand will grow by about 35% in the next 25 years, with nearly 70% of this increase supplied by fossil fuels. Demand for oil will rise in the intermediate and longer term. And for Albertans and their energy sector, that has meant, and it will mean, prosperity at home. I have said repeatedly in my former role as Minister of Natural Resources, and now I want to reiterate it from an economic and financial perspective. There is a strategic imperative to diversify our energy markets and move our energy to tidewater. Without improved access to global markets, Canadian crude oil prices will continue to be both lower and more volatile than those prevailing globally, translating into heightened uncertainty and poor economic growth. Furthermore, the differential which Canadian oil and gas generate versus the world price represents an annual drain on our economy in tens of billions of dollars. Finally, it is a matter of urgent national interest that we move our oil to tidewater because our only customer, the United States, has found vast amounts of shale oil and gas and will need us less and less. If we do not access new markets, our resources will be stranded and a huge opportunity will be lost. But more than that, the Canadian economy will suffer a major decline, which will affect every region in the country from coast to coast to coast. The U.S. economy is benefiting enormously from the shale revolution. It would be foolhardy in the extreme for us to sit on the sidelines and watch our neighbor prosper while we settle for mediocrity and decline. Our government is determined that that not happen. But everyone should know that in spite of this urgent need, we will not go ahead with any project that is not safe for Canadians and safe for the environment. We determine that safety through a thorough, independent, scientific regulatory review. In the meantime, during this difficult period for Alberta, our federal government is taking action to protect Canada's economy and secure its long-term prosperity. As Canada's finance minister, I'm coming up on my first federal budget. My top priority is to craft a budget that will create jobs, growth, and long-term prosperity, a priority shared by all Albertans. And as I undertake that task, I'm consulting with Canadians from coast to coast. And that is what brings me to Calgary. Earlier today, I hosted a pre-budget consultation with my colleague Kevin Sorensen and my colleague Joan Crockatt. This was our 8th formal consultation, although my caucus colleagues and I have conducted numerous informal discussions right across the country. The prior formal consultations have been held in Vancouver, Toronto, Quebec City, Fredericton, Moncton, and Winnipeg. This tour is about listening, hearing from Canadians about what matters to them and their families. Now, let me address a question I'm frequently asked. When will the next be? Well, as the great Yogi Bear once said, I wish I had an answer because I'm tired of answering the question. That said, given the current market instability, I will not bring forward our budget earlier than April. We need all the information we can obtain before finalizing our decisions. Now, I want to talk about the context, the financial state of our nation, where we have been, where we are now, and our vision for the future. Internationally, the economic context is one of strife and struggle. For Canada, the recession is long gone, but its impact is still weighing on the global economy. After the most severe global recession since the Great Depression, it's the weakest global recovery. Euro area economic growth has been stop and go, a sustainable recovery elusive. The continent's three largest economies, Germany, France, and Italy, contracted in the second quarter of 2014 have remained weak in the third quarter. For the first time since 2009, the euro area has recorded a decline in consumer prices. In other words, it is experiencing deflation, which is very worrying. Beyond Europe, growth rates of key emerging economies, China and Brazil, are losing steam. And geopolitical crises, Ukraine, Iraq, and Syria, pose serious risks in complicating, and they are complicating our recovery. The barbaric terrorist acts in Paris, which have followed attacks in Australia and Nigeria, in our own capital and elsewhere, are alarming people around the world. Fortunately, after a weak start last year, the outlook for the U.S. economy has strengthened considerably. But economists are asking if America can carry the entire global economy. The International Monetary Fund warns that economic risks have increased. Since July 2012, it downgraded growth projections for last year 8 times. Its managing director, Christine Lagarde, talks of a new mediocre. And just a couple of days ago, the World Bank reduced yet again its forecast of global growth, this time to 3%. We have been saying for years that the global economy is very fragile, and that remains all too true. In this challenging global situation, Canada has fared well. The downturn did not start here, it was later than most, and affected us less. We emerged more quickly and in better shape than other developed economies. And we have accomplished so much as Canadians together. We created over 1.2 million net new jobs since the depths of the downturn. These are overwhelmingly full-time, high-paying, private sector jobs. More Canadians are working today than in any time in our history. At 6.6%, Canada is now enjoying its lowest unemployment rate in 6 years. And Canadians are wealthier for their work. In fact, the Canadian middle class is among the richest in the developed world. Since taking office in 2006, we've been carefully crafting a more confident Canada. Confident in its prosperity, confident in its future, filling the words of our national anthem, a true north, strong and free. Not since John Diefenbaker was Prime Minister over a half-century ago has the overall tax burden been this low. Canada's free trade network now touches every corner of the globe. I cannot overstate the importance of this to the Canadian economy. When our government took office in 2006, Canada had free trade agreements with 5 countries. That was not good enough for our country, where 60% of GDP and 1 in 5 jobs are tied to trade. Now we have free trade deals with 43 countries. The National Post called Canada a free trade empire. It now covers the 2 largest markets in the world, Europe and the United States. Our government is expanding opportunity abroad, but even more importantly, building it here at home. According to KPMG, total business tax costs in Canada are now the lowest in the G7, 46% lower than in the United States. Bloomberg ranks us the 2nd most attractive place in the world to do business. These successes build the foundation for a thriving private sector, one that invests, grows, and creates jobs. And this is especially true for small business owners and entrepreneurs like many of you. Small businesses employ half of the working men and women in Canada's private sector. They account for 1/3 of our country's GDP. Small business owners should be spending time growing their businesses and creating jobs. They should not be choking on red tape and high taxes. So we cut the red tape, we cut the small business tax rate to 11% and increased the amount of income eligible for this lower rate. Together, these changes are providing small businesses with an estimated $2.2 billion in tax relief in 2014 alone. Then we introduced the Small Business Job Credit. This credit effectively lowers small businesses' employment insurance. 90% of businesses that pay employment insurance premiums are affected. About 780,000 in total will directly benefit. Friends, we are a strong nation with a promising future, but there is a lesson to be had from the Great Recession. Growth and prosperity cannot be taken for granted. And this has been a hard lesson for many countries to learn. The Great Recession wreaked havoc on some of the world's strongest economies. At the same time, new economic powers are emerging who will account for over 90% of global growth over the next 25 years. They represent new markets and opportunity. They also represent fierce competition. So we confront a choice: to act, to create jobs, growth, and resilience in a competitive global economy, or risk long-term economic decline. So where does the path to prosperity lie? Through our low-tax plan for jobs and growth. These targeted, affordable measures are found in Canada's Economic Action Plan. Measures to keep taxes low for Canadian families and job creators, equip Canadians with the skills they need to pursue the jobs they want, responsibly develop natural resource wealth, invest in world-class research and innovation, reduce red tape and empower businesses, encourage trade and foreign investment, and make historic investments in infrastructure. These measures are built on a rock-solid foundation. Our government's commitment to return to balanced budgets in 2015. In the worst of the recession, Canada's deficit stood at over $55 billion. Today, it has been reduced by over 90% to just over $5 billion, and it is continuing to fall. This year's deficit is expected to be $2.9 billion. Next year, we are projecting a balanced budget and then a surplus that will continue to grow in the years that follow, rising to over $13 billion by 2019-20. As I said, lower oil prices will adversely impact our federal government's fiscal situation, but the decline in oil prices will not prevent our government from achieving a budgetary balance in 2015-16. And this will be based on private sector economic forecasts, which is what we have always done in the past. There is nothing new here. La baisse du cours de pétrole n'empêcherait pas notre gouvernement de rétablir l'équilibre budgétaire en 2015. While so many other countries are still locked in deep deficits, Canada's net debt to GDP ratio is less than half that of the G7 average. It's not easy to return to a balanced budget. Budgets, after all, do not balance themselves. That requires a plan and the discipline to follow it. We did not accomplish it by raising taxes or slashing transfers to the provinces like our predecessors. To the contrary, we provided tax relief over 180 times since taking office. And federal support for Alberta is at an all-time high. Next year, Alberta will receive $5.2 billion in major transfers, a 145% increase over transfers under the former Liberal government. What is not growing is bloated Ottawa bureaucracy. Direct federal program spending has declined for the fourth year in a row. We controlled government spending, something that few countries have done in decades. And we've done it while maintaining the programs and services that Canadians rely on. As a result, we've provided even more support for hard-working Canadian families. I refer, of course, to our government's latest steps to put more money in the pockets of Canadian families, increasing the universal child care benefit from $100 to $160 a month for each child under the age of 6, and providing parents $60 a month for children aged 6 through 17. Introducing the family tax cut, a new non-refundable tax credit aimed at couples with minor children. It allows a spouse to effectively transfer up to $50,000 of taxable income to a spouse in a lower tax bracket with a maximum tax savings of $2,000. And finally, increasing the child care expense deduction limits by $1,000. Indeed, every family with children, all 4 million, will benefit from these new measures to the tune of $1,140 on average next year. And I'm especially proud that a significant majority of the benefits will go to low and middle income Canadians and 25% to families earning less than $30,000 a year. We're cutting taxes for families for a simple reason. Across Canada, Canadians are telling us the same thing. The cost of living, from groceries, to hydro, to housing, is going up. We know that for a more affordable life, Canadians need a more affordable tax burden. And the fact is, according to a Fraser Institute report released last August, Canadians are paying, on average, about 42% of their income in taxes to all levels of government, more than food, clothing, and lodging combined. Parents have a lot to pay for: children, sports, clothing, and much, much more. Our government believes in putting more money into the hands of those who care about their children the most, mom and dad. Our Conservative government understands these basic truths. No government can tax its way to prosperity, and no government can indefinitely spend more than it earns. Higher debt means higher taxes and service cuts for our children and our grandchildren. We have a duty to manage our finances responsibly, and that is why we are focused on getting back to balance and staying there. Our government is delivering. Prime Minister Harper is providing the serious leadership Canada needs in serious times. Now is not the time for risky experiments or a flighty trip back to discarded ideas and failed policies. Our government has a plan to meet our challenges, a plan that is working, and we need to stay the course. We survived the Great Recession. Now we will take the action necessary to secure prosperity for this generation and next. As we undertake this work, I look forward to working with this chamber and its members, energetic entrepreneurs who together are driving Canada forward to a bright future. I'm honored to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Those were some outstanding remarks, and I can tell you from your days of your previous portfolio that Alberta appreciates your support and the energy and the vigor that you bring to Canada's natural resource industry and your belief in making it a national imperative. So thank you very much for that. I know you have a very tight schedule, and we've agreed on just a couple of quick questions, but from another national imperative, you said investing in the infrastructure, and that can be everything from issues of market access, but some of the issues around ensuring our cities are efficient in mobility, public transit, and the core infrastructure. What are some federal government perspectives and plans with respect to infrastructure of national significance like this one?
Sure. We have the largest and longest infrastructure program in the history of Canada. Now $75 billion over the next 10 years, $53 billion of which will go to the provinces and to the municipalities. The provinces will identify the projects and will participate in that, often in a P3 structure. So we believe that infrastructure is crucial. It's necessary to rebuild deteriorating infrastructure. It's also necessary to respond to burgeoning population growth in a lot of areas, including, of course, in particular, Alberta. So we're committed to that, and we'll look at other measures as we go forward. There's talk on this issue. It's certainly not either or. The question is where on the continuum you put the pin. We've put it quite far in favor of this important initiative, $75 billion. But we will do that in the context of our fiscal capacity. And we don't think that just mentioning infrastructure justifies massive deficits, and we don't intend to go there.
Thank you. You mentioned a very impressive and enviable unemployment rate in Canada, some of our prosperity initiatives and requirements as we go forward, and also people are a key component of that. And I wonder if you could comment on the federal government's plan to ensure we have Canadians skilled and trained in the right occupations in order to meet the needs of business and industry supporting the economic growth.
Well, this is a really crucial issue, and Mr. Jason Kenney has that as part of his core responsibilities. And it's something that every time I meet with my pre-budget consultation groups, and as I talk to Canadians across the country, it's always one of the key issues which is raised. But we have an unemployment rate which is down somewhat. And by the way, if you use the U.S. methodology, we're actually at the same or slightly lower unemployment rate than the United States, somewhere around 5.5%. But we nevertheless believe that unemployment rate is higher than it should be. It's a lot higher for youth, and so it's an issue we have to deal with. At the same time, there are some companies, many here in Alberta, that are crying for skilled workers. So there's clearly a mismatch. Part of it is because the skills are not there. Part of it is because some people are reluctant to move. Part of it relates to cultural issues, where parents have discouraged their children to go to polytechnic schools where they can learn trades and where they would be hired very, very quickly. But we have instituted a number of programs to help apprentices get jobs and get paid. We have a job matching service, and we're encouraging companies to hire new workers and to train them. We also are looking at the fact that certain groups are underrepresented in the workforce. Interestingly enough, women in the workforce have a higher participation rate in Canada than virtually any other developed country in the world. So we're doing quite well there. Where we're not doing particularly well is with new Canadians, Aboriginal Canadians, and the disabled. So those are specific areas that we have to look at as well. And Jason can provide a more robust answer, but it's a high priority for our country, and it must be.
Thank you, Minister Alward. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking you. Thank you, Minister Oliver, for giving us some of your very busy time here in Calgary. Thank you for hosting the roundtable earlier this morning, for sharing your remarks with Calgary's business community over lunch here. It is, again, my pleasure to thank our sponsors for today's event, the presenting sponsors of Sunport and Encana, and our supporting sponsors of Imperial, Enbridge, TransCanada, and RGO.
ਦਿਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਉਮੰਗ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਵਿਰਸੇ ਤੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਅਤ ਦੇ ਸੰਗ परदेसी मिट्टी ते जिउण दा देसी नवे पुराने गाने सेलिब्रिटी इंटरव्यूज ते होर भी मनोरंजक प्रोग्रामां दा ऑन एयर चैनल जो है सब तो दबंग सब रंग 94.7 FM सब रंग